Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, President Badger. Good to see you again. I think the first time that we connected was when you had first been appointed in 2019, and I know that it's been a very interesting year for all of us related to COVID and everything that we've experienced. I want to just echo the comments made by the chair and several of our colleagues who have expressed their disappointment and frustration with the lag time and just how long it takes to get responses or movement from the California Public Utilities Commission. I want to bring up the issue that was brought up before. That's the issue of net energy metering. And with the purpose of that, I want to go and actually look at the report that was published by the PUC in February of this year, Utility Cost and Affordability of the Grid of the Future and Evaluation of Electric Cost, Rates, and Equity Issues. On page 28, when the study that you produced, some alarming information. And I'd like to just take a moment to just read a little bit so that we all have context in terms of what I'm describing. When it comes to net energy meterings, NEM customers are disproportionately older, located in high-income areas, likely to own their own home, and less likely to live in a disadvantaged community. Consequently, the cost of net energy metering are disproportionately paid by younger, less wealthy, and more disadvantaged ratepayers, many of whom are renters. To address this concern, it's noted that the PUC will be doing something about that this year moving forward. I represent a community that is 20% below the national poverty line, that is in East Los Angeles in Assembly District 51, that is not serviced by LADWP, but by an investor-owned utility, Edison. And in this same report, it states that as of December 2020, approximately 361,000 residential NEM customers and 1.5 million care customers participated or received their energy through Edison. Of these care customers, only 4% participated in NEM, meaning over 1.4 million care customers who are low-income families, or about 96%, shoulder the additional cost burden from all NEM customers. This is in your report, and it's taken the PUC years and years to do something to address the cost shift. I'd like to know from you directly, what is your response to a low-income family that's a care customer that's having to pay the cost of the cost shift and the difference from the more affluent customers that actually receive the benefit from NEM? What would you say to those people who have been struggling, who can barely afford their rent, put food on the table, and actually will benefit from the PUC addressing this burden of the cost shift that has not been addressed? What would you say to those low-income families as to why the PUC has failed to act?
Thank you very much. I would say that I'm as disheartened as you are. And we have as I spoke earlier, excuse me, we have a proceeding that is currently underway that is looking very closely at the cost shift, very closely at the issue that you just very well described. I would say the inequity or the unfairness of the current structure that the net energy metering has in its current form. That proceeding will be concluding the end of this year, as I mentioned earlier. And indeed, cost shift is a very important part of this proceeding that we are looking at.
Thank you, and I appreciate that answer, but what I'm missing is the compassion. What I'm missing is the fact that this could have been fixed years ago, and it still hasn't. And it weighs heavily on care customers who are already incredibly hurting and are having to pay the difference for somebody who is more affluent, who is not paying their fair share into the grid.
Well, I apologize if I do not seem compassionate and that I'm not showing the needed passion. I think that my colleagues and my fellow commissioners would attest to both my passion and theirs. in terms of making sure that electricity is safe and reliable and, most importantly, affordable for everyone. And as I said, we are currently going to be addressing this issue. I can't, under rules and regulations, tell you that it's most definitely, this is the decision of the proceeding. I would be getting out ahead of the votes of my fellow commissioners. But cost shift has been analyzed. You well recited from our report. There's other modeling that we have been done. We will be taking further public comment on this issue that's extremely informing to us, and we will be making a decision at the end of the year. And I do care deeply for your constituents and all people that are disadvantaged and in low-income areas throughout our state. We have increased this year, sadly because of pandemic mostly, but we've increased the customers that subscribe to CARE and FARA, and I think that is very, very important. And I know that many Californians are struggling to pay their electricity bills, and the more efficiency that we can bring to the electric grid, and the more we can do that will bring our rates down, and the more we can do that brings greater efficiency in terms of what we're doing to our environment, greater effectiveness, I should say, is better for everyone, particularly those folks that do live in disadvantaged communities and are more subject to some of the pollutants and some of the other difficulties that come from industrial waste, if you will.
I want to just a clarifying question, because there's been a lot of misinformation being shared on social media relating to a particular bill that was in the Assembly House and whose responsibility it is regarding rates. Can you please clarify on the record who is responsible for investor-owned utility rates? Is it the utilities themselves, or is it the PUC?
It's the PUC.
So when we see investor-owned utilities raise the rates on utilities, that's because the PUC has not acted. Is that accurate? Related to the shift in cost.
I'm sorry. If I may just correct you a little bit. Rates that are increased by the investor-owned utilities have to be approved by the PUC.
Correct. So that means that the PUC is responsible for either acting or not acting on the cost shift.
We are responsible, yes.
So just for the record, the PUC is responsible for the cost shifts and not the individual investor-owned utilities, correct?
As you're referring to net energy metering?
Yes.
I think that would be accurate in the way you've laid it out. Am I correct, Ed?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we have that on record, because there's a lot of misinformation as to who is responsible for the cost shift, whether it's the utilities, the investor-owned utilities themselves, or whether it's the PUC. And because we have seen a failure to act on the net energy metering and the cost shift for many years now, there seems to be an opportunity for us to get to a better place by the end of this year, which is what I heard you say earlier. And I'm really looking forward to that, because again, I don't believe that my low-income residents in East Los Angeles, who are already 20% below the national poverty line, should have to carry the burden of having to pay the difference for a more affluent community right next door.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and one just final question, and I appreciate the time and consideration, but is it the responsibility of the legislature to push legislation to make the PUC act, or should the PUC act be doing its job and moving forward with what's needed?
Well, the legislature is a separate branch of government, and I believe that they have every right and responsibility to pass laws that instruct the executive branch how to do their job. So I would never question the authority or the responsibility of the legislature. However, having said that, the PUC, or any other state agency that I have been involved in, has a responsibility to operate in a very effective manner and to take care of those they are responsible for, and that's, in our case, it's the ratepayers and the people of California. So we should always act on behalf of all of California.
Thank you, President Badger. I really appreciate that answer, because I don't believe that the legislation that we were moving most recently here in the Assembly is actually legislation that was needed had the PUC acted accordingly in the last few years. Now, I recognize that under your leadership that's going to change, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that. But it really does beg the question that if there is respect for the legislature and the PUC has not acted on the legislation passed to ensure that we are addressing the cost shift related to net energy metering, then we're going around in circles in terms of passing legislation that's important, years and years where there is no action, and now here we are with your own report that came out in February of this year indicating a real inequity issue related to solar and related to net energy metering and related to utilities overall. So again, I know that this is something that you're working on, and hopefully by the end of this year we have a resolution. But just know that there are several of us that are looking at climate change and what that looks like, improvements to the grid, the reality of reaching 100% renewables by 2045 and other goals that we have put upon the state that I believe in. But by doing so, we also need the PUC to act and to also figure out a way that we don't put the burdens on low-income families simply because they don't own the roof over their heads. Renters also need an opportunity to be part of the climate solution. And it shouldn't be on the backs of low-income families. And I just want to make sure that you hear me loud and clear, because this is an issue about equity and ensuring that as we move forward, we are part of the solution versus this conversation that we're having now and that we've been having since I met you in 2019.
I hear you very loud and clear, and I respect you, as do my fellow commissioners. So thank you very much for that very helpful, constructive criticism.
Thank you. I'm good, Mr. Chair.